The morning air in Sector 7 of the Galactic Academy carried the familiar scent of ozone and recycled atmosphere. Maya Chen walked through the corridors with her head down, clutching her datapad against her chest like armor. The hallways buzzed with the chatter of dozens of species, their voices creating a symphony of alien languages that had become background noise over the past 3 months. "Look, it's the dirt crawler," sneered Zixtal, a Vraxian whose serpentine body coiled elegantly as he blocked Maya's path. His scaled face twisted into what passed for a smirk among his kind. "Still pretending you belong here with real sentience." Maya's grip tightened on her datapad, but she said nothing. Around them, other students slowed their pace, sensing drama. The Galactic Academy was supposed to be a place of learning and unity among the stars, but Maya had quickly learned that teenagers were teenagers regardless of their planet of origin. Kethera, a towering Xanthari with 4 arms and crystalline skin, laughed with a sound like breaking glass. "My grandmother always said humans were the galaxy's mistake. Too violent, too unpredictable. They should have stayed in their little corner of space." "Yeah," chimed in Plex, a blob-like Galatari whose form rippled with amusement. "Remember the stories about the human wars? Savages who destroyed entire worlds just because they could. Good thing they're mostly extinct now." Maya's jaw clenched, but she remained silent. If only they knew how wrong they were about humans being mostly extinct. If only they knew what she had done to ensure humanity's survival. But those memories belonged to another time, another version of herself that she had buried deep. The crowd of students grew larger as more aliens gathered to watch the daily ritual of tormenting the lone human. There were Aquarians with their gill slits fluttering nervously, insectoid hivelings clicking their mandibles in disapproval, and even some of the peaceful Harmonians whose musical voices had fallen silent. "I heard humans used to eat their own kind," whispered a young cloudwalker, her gaseous form shimmering with disgust. "Imagine being so primitive that you resort to cannibalism." Maya finally looked up, her dark eyes meeting the crowd. For just a moment, something flickered in those depths, something ancient and terrible that made several of the closer students take an involuntary step back. But it passed so quickly that most dismissed it as a trick of the artificial lighting. "I'm just trying to get to class," Maya said quietly, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. Zixtal slithered closer, his forked tongue tasting the air. "Oh, the little human speaks. Tell us, dirt crawler. What's it like knowing your species failed so completely? What's it like being the last remnant of a dead civilization?" The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. Maya's classmates didn't know that she wasn't just the last human at the academy. As far as she knew, she might be one of the last humans anywhere. The Great Purge had been thorough, systematic, and nearly complete. Only a handful of human colonies remained hidden in the outer rim, and she was their guardian's daughter. "My species isn't dead," Maya said, her voice barely above a whisper. "We're just sleeping." The crowd erupted in laughter. Even some of the teachers who had gathered to break up the confrontation seemed amused by her defiance. To them, she was just a delusional child clinging to false hope. Professor Velthar, an elderly Archerian with feathers that had seen better days, finally intervened. "Enough, all of you, get to your classes. Ms. Chen, you as well." As the crowd dispersed, Maya heard the whispers following her down the hall. Stories about human brutality, human stupidity, human weakness. Each word was a knife that cut deeper than the last. They spoke of her people as monsters and failures in the same breath, never understanding the contradiction. In advanced xenobiology, Maya took her usual seat at the back of the class. The other students gave her a wide berth as if humanity might be contagious. Dr. Nithali, a graceful Etherian whose translucent skin glowed softly, began the day's lesson on extinct civilizations. "Today we'll be studying the fall of humanity," Dr. Nithali announced, her voice carrying easily through the classroom. "Once considered one of the most promising species in the galaxy, humans ultimately destroyed themselves through their own violent nature." Maya's pencil snapped in her grip. Around her, students turned to stare, some with pity, others with barely concealed glee. She was being forced to sit through a lecture about her own people's supposed downfall, listening to lies and half-truths presented as historical fact. The holographic display showed images of human cities in flames, battleships engaged in fierce combat, and worlds reduced to ash and debris. But Maya knew the real story. She knew about the synthetic war, the alien coalition that had tried to wipe out humanity, and the terrible price that had been paid for survival. The final battle at Terra Prime lasted only 6 hours. Dr. Nithali continued. Human resistance crumbled in the face of superior alien technology and tactics. It's a cautionary tale about what happens when a species prioritizes aggression over diplomacy. Maya's hands began to shake. She remembered Terra Prime. She remembered the screams, the fire, the moment when she had been forced to make a choice that would haunt her forever. The doctor's words painted humans as the aggressors, but Maya knew the truth. Humanity had been defending itself against extinction. As the lecture continued, Maya closed her eyes and tried to center herself using the meditation techniques her father had taught her. But the memories kept pushing through her defenses like water through a cracked dam. The weight of what she had done, what she had been forced to become, pressed down on her shoulders like a physical burden. When the class finally ended, Maya was the first to leave. But she could hear the whispers starting again behind her, following her like a shadow she couldn't escape. The Academy's training facility hummed with activity, as students practiced combat techniques from across the galaxy. Maya stood at the edge of the sparring circle, watching her classmates demonstrate their species' fighting styles with varying degrees of skill. The air was thick with sweat and determination, punctuated by the occasional grunt of effort or cry of victory. Commander Thexel, a battle-scarred veteran from the Thanarian military, surveyed the room with sharp eyes. His species were known throughout the galaxy as master tacticians, and his presence at the Academy was considered a great honor by most students. Unfortunately for Maya, he seemed to share the common belief that humans were inherently violent and uncontrolled. "Chen," he barked, his voice cutting through the noise like a plasma blade. "You're up. Let's see if the stories about human combat instincts are true." Maya's stomach dropped. She had been dreading this moment for weeks, ever since combat training had begun. The other students formed a circle around the sparring mat, their alien faces eager with anticipation. This wasn't about education anymore. It was about watching the human fail spectacularly. Zixtal slithered forward, his serpentine body coiling with predatory grace. "I volunteer to demonstrate proper technique, Commander. Someone needs to show the primitive how real warriors fight." The Vraxian was easily twice Maya's height when he reared up, his scaled hide gleaming under the facility's lights. His species were natural fighters, with reflexes honed by millions of years of evolution as apex predators. Maya looked like a child standing next to him. "Excellent," Commander Thexel said with approval. "Remember, this is a learning exercise. No permanent damage, Zixtal. We want the human functional for her remaining classes." The casual dismissal in his voice made Maya's blood run cold. They expected her to lose badly, probably within seconds. The betting pool that had started among the students suggested most thought she wouldn't last 30 seconds against Zixtal's superior reach and speed. Maya stepped onto the mat, her movements careful and controlled. Inside her mind, she could feel old instincts stirring, muscle memory from another life that she had spent 3 years trying to forget. Her father had made her promise to never reveal her true capabilities unless absolutely necessary. The human colonies were still in hiding, and their survival depended on the galaxy continuing to believe that humanity was extinct or irrelevant. "Begin," Commander Thexel commanded. Zixtal struck immediately, his body moving like liquid lightning as he attempted to coil around Maya and crush her in his powerful embrace. It was a classic Vraxian hunting technique, one that had brought down prey animals twice his size on his homeworld. Maya moved aside at the last second, but not gracefully. She stumbled slightly, looking exactly like what everyone expected, a clumsy human girl in over her head. Zixtal's tail whipped around, catching her in the shoulder and sending her sprawling across the mat. The crowd erupted in laughter and cheers for Zixtal. "Is that all humans can do?" shouted Kethera. "Fall down and hope for mercy?" Maya pushed herself to her feet, wiping blood from her split lip. Zixtal was already moving in for another attack, confidence radiating from every scale on his body. His species were proud warriors, and defeating a human would be a story he could tell for years. But as Zixtal lunged forward, something shifted in Maya's eyes. For just an instant, the frightened schoolgirl facade cracked, revealing something far older and infinitely more dangerous underneath. Her body moved without conscious thought, muscle memory overriding 3 years of careful suppression. She sidestepped Zixtal's charge with inhuman precision, her hand shooting out to strike a nerve cluster at the base of his skull. The Vraxian's eyes widened in shock as his body convulsed, temporary paralysis spreading through his nervous system. Before he could recover, Maya had pivoted behind him and applied pressure to another nerve point, sending him crashing to the mat. The entire room fell silent. Zixtal lay motionless for several seconds before twitching back to consciousness, his serpentine form coiled in confusion and pain. He had been defeated in less than 5 seconds by techniques that shouldn't have been possible for someone with Maya's apparent skill level. Impossible, whispered Dr. Nithali, who had arrived to observe the training session. Those were advanced Zenkari pressure point techniques. How could a human possibly know them? Maya stood over Zixtal's prone form, her chest rising and falling with controlled breaths. Inside her mind, alarms were screaming. She had revealed too much, moved too fast, shown knowledge that a 17-year-old human shouldn't possess. But seeing Zixtal's arrogant face, hearing the crowd's cruel laughter, had triggered responses she thought she had buried forever. Commander Thexel approached the mat slowly, his tactical mind analyzing what he had just witnessed. "Where did you learn those techniques, Chen?" "My father taught me," Maya said quietly, which was technically true. Her father had been the one to train her, though not in the way these aliens would imagine. The truth was far more complicated and infinitely more dangerous. "Your father must have been quite the warrior," the commander mused, his tone thoughtful. "Those moves require years of study and perfect timing. Most professional soldiers never master them." Around the circle, Maya's classmates exchanged uncertain glances. The human they had been tormenting for months had just defeated one of their strongest fighters, using techniques they didn't recognize. Some looked impressed, others confused, but a few, like Cathara, seemed almost afraid. Zixtal slowly pushed himself to his feet, his pride wounded more than his body. "Lucky shot," he hissed, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "I underestimated the primitive." Maya met his gaze steadily. "Yes," she said softly. "You did." The weight of her words carried implications that none of them could understand. Zixtal had underestimated her, just as the galaxy had underestimated humanity. It was a mistake that had cost countless alien civilizations dearly during the war, and one that Maya hoped would never need to be repeated. As the training session continued, Maya returned to the sidelines, but the atmosphere had changed. Students who had been mocking her moments before now watched her with wary respect. The human girl was more than she appeared, and that realization sent ripples of unease through the group. In the Academy's database, automated systems flagged unusual combat performance metrics for student Maya Chen. The data was filed away for routine review, but it would eventually find its way to intelligence analysts who specialized in identifying potential threats. Maya's carefully maintained cover was beginning to develop cracks. The Academy's library was a vast cathedral of knowledge, its crystalline walls containing information from thousands of worlds and millions of years of galactic history. Maya found herself drawn there more and more often, seeking solitude among the data terminals that hummed quietly in the filtered light. It was the only place where she could escape the whispers and stares that had intensified since her combat demonstration. She sat at a terminal in the deepest section of the library, accessing files that most students never bothered to read. Historical military records, tactical analyses, and classified documents that had been declassified centuries ago. Maya told herself she was researching for her xenobiology class, but the truth was more complicated. She was trying to understand how the galaxy remembered the war that had shaped her entire existence. The files painted a picture of humanity that made her sick to her stomach. According to galactic records, humans were portrayed as savage barbarians who had somehow acquired advanced technology and used it to terrorize peaceful civilizations. The reports described unprovoked attacks, senseless destruction, and a species driven by an insatiable hunger for violence. But Maya knew the real story. She had lived through it. Researching your own people's failures? Maya spun around to find Velthara standing behind her, the young harmonium's voice carrying its usual musical quality tinged with disdain. Unlike the others, Velthara had never been openly cruel to Maya, but her subtle condescension was perhaps worse than outright hostility. "Just studying," Maya replied, closing the files quickly. Velthara moved closer, her ethereal form radiating a soft blue glow. "I've been watching you since your display in combat training. There's something different about you, isn't there?" Something you're not telling us. Maya's heart rate accelerated, but she kept her expression neutral. I don't know what you mean. My people are empathic, Velthara said softly. We sense emotions, memories, the weight of experiences. When I look at you, I don't see a 17-year-old student. I see someone carrying the burden of lifetimes. The words hit closer to home than Maya was comfortable with. The Harmonium were known for their psychological insights, their ability to read the emotional resonance of other beings. If Velthara could sense something unusual about her, others might too. You're imagining things, Maya said, standing to leave. Am I? Velthara blocked her path, her expression serious. The techniques you used against Zixtal aren't taught anywhere in the galaxy anymore. They were lost during the Purge Wars, along with the civilization that created them. So tell me, Maya Chen, how does a human girl know the fighting styles of the extinct Catharan Empire? Maya's blood turned to ice. The Catharan Empire had been one of humanity's greatest allies during the war, and their combat techniques had been shared only with the most trusted human operatives. The fact that Velthara recognized them meant she had access to historical records that should have been buried forever. I need to go, Maya whispered, pushing past the Harmonium girl. But Velthara's next words stopped her cold. My grandmother fought in the Purge Wars. She was there when the Catharan homeworld burned. She told me stories about the human warriors who fought alongside them. Ghosts who could end battles with a touch. Shadows who moved through enemy lines like death itself. She called them the Reapers. Maya's hands began to shake. The Reapers had been humanity's most elite unit, trained in every combat discipline known to the galaxy. They had been legends even among their own kind, and their existence had been classified at the highest levels. There should have been no record of them in any galactic database. That's just a story, Maya managed to say, is it? Velthara stepped closer, her empathic abilities focused entirely on Maya. Because when I look at you, I see the same darkness my grandmother described. The weight of impossible choices, the echo of battles that should never have been fought, the grief of watching worlds die. Maya felt her carefully constructed facade beginning to crumble. For 3 years, she had hidden among these aliens, pretending to be just another student while carrying secrets that could reshape the galaxy's understanding of recent history. But now someone was seeing through her disguise, recognizing the trained killer she had been forced to become. You're wrong, Maya said, but her voice lacked conviction. Velthara's expression softened with something that might have been sympathy. My grandmother also told me that the Reapers were created from children. The war demanded soldiers who could think differently, who could adapt faster than their enemies. They took human children and taught them to become something beyond normal limitations. The words were like physical blows. Maya remembered the training compounds, the endless drills, the systematic destruction of everything that had made her a normal child. She remembered watching her classmates die in missions that required impossibly perfect execution. She remembered becoming a weapon in the shape of a little girl. How old were you when it started? Velthara asked gently. Maya closed her eyes, fighting back memories that threatened to overwhelm her. 7, she whispered without thinking. And how long did you serve? 10 years. The answer came automatically, pulled from depths she had tried to seal forever. When Maya opened her eyes, Velthara was staring at her with a mixture of horror and understanding. The Harmonium's empathic abilities had allowed her to feel the truth behind Maya's words, to sense the decades of trauma compressed into a 17-year-old body. By the cosmic void, Velthara breathed. You really are one of them. A Reaper. Maya straightened, and for a moment her true nature showed through the careful disguise. Her posture shifted into something predatory and alert, her eyes scanning for exits and potential threats. Every instinct screamed at her to eliminate the witness, to protect the secret that kept the remaining human colonies safe. But then she remembered her father's words, spoken on the day she had left for the academy. You're not a weapon anymore, Maya. You're a girl trying to find her place in a universe that doesn't understand what you've sacrificed for it. Hold on to that humanity no matter what. Please, Maya said, her voice breaking. Don't tell anyone. There are others depending on me keeping this secret. Velthara studied her for a long moment, her empathic senses reading the desperation and hope warring within Maya's heart. Finally, she nodded slowly. Your secret is safe, she said, but you should know that you're not as alone as you think. The galaxy hasn't forgotten everything about what really happened during the war. Some of us know that humans weren't the monsters they've been painted as. Maya felt a tear run down her cheek, the first she had allowed herself to shed in years. For so long, she had carried the weight of her people's true history alone, watching as lies became accepted fact. To know that someone else understood, even partially, felt like a gift she didn't deserve. But even as relief washed over her, Maya knew that her time at the academy was running out. Secrets had a way of spreading, and there were too many people who would kill to get their hands on a living reaper. The safe haven her father had tried to create for her was becoming more dangerous by the day. The academy's night cycle brought artificial stars to the domed ceiling, but Maya couldn't sleep. She stood at the window of her small dormitory room, watching ships come and go from the orbital platform above. Each vessel could be carrying intelligence agents, bounty hunters, or worse, survivors from the alien coalitions that had tried to exterminate humanity. Her conversation with Velthara had changed everything. Someone knew her secret, and despite the Harmonium girl's promise, Maya understood how quickly information could spread in a place like the academy. Every glance from her classmates now felt like a potential threat. Every teacher's question a probe for more information. A soft chime indicated an incoming message on her personal communicator. Maya's blood chilled when she saw the sender's identification. Command Authority Galactic Intelligence Division. The message was brief and terrifying in its implications. Report to Administrative Sector 7 immediately for routine interview regarding recent academic performance. Maya deleted the message and began to pack. She had been at the academy long enough to know that midnight summons from intelligence were never routine. Someone had connected the dots between her combat performance and historical records that should have remained buried. Her carefully maintained cover was blown. Moving with practiced efficiency, she gathered the few possessions that mattered: her father's encrypted communication device, false identification papers that would get her passage on a transport ship, and a small vial of nanites that could alter her appearance if necessary. Everything else was expendable. The dormitory corridors were empty as Maya made her way toward the service levels. She had memorized the academy's layout weeks ago, identifying multiple escape routes and contingency plans. It was impossible to turn off 18 years of tactical training, even when trying to live as a normal student. But as she reached the service elevator, footsteps echoed behind her. Maya spun around to find Zixtal slithering toward her, his serpentine form moving with predatory grace. In the dim emergency lighting, his scaled hide looked almost black and his eyes gleamed with malicious intent. "Going somewhere, human?" he hissed, positioning himself between Maya and the elevator. "I'm just taking a walk," Maya replied, her voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding her system. "Couldn't sleep." Zixtal's forked tongue tasted the air and his expression shifted to something resembling satisfaction. "Fear," he said. "You reek of it. Good. You humiliated me in front of the entire class and now it's time for payback." Maya noticed that Zixtal wasn't alone. Shadows moved in the side corridors, Kithara's crystalline form catching stray light, the blob-like shape of Plex oozing into position, and several other students she recognized as part of Zixtal's usual crowd. They had planned this confrontation, choosing the perfect time and place where there would be no teachers or witnesses. "I don't want any trouble," Maya said, backing toward the wall. "Too bad," Zixtal snarled. "Because trouble found you. Do you know what I discovered when I researched those combat techniques you used? They don't exist in any current database, but I have family connections in the military archives and they found references to something called Project Reaper." Maya's heart stopped. The project files had been classified beyond top secret, accessible only to the highest levels of Galactic Command. If Zixtal had found traces of them, it meant someone with serious authority was investigating her background. "I don't know what you're talking about," Maya said, but she was already calculating distances and angles. 6 attackers in a confined space, all of them larger and stronger than her apparent capabilities. They expected the frightened human girl they had been tormenting for months. They were about to meet someone very different. Kithara stepped into the light, all 4 of her crystalline arms gleaming with sharp edges. "The files say the Reapers were human children turned into living weapons. Impossible, of course, but it makes for an interesting story. Tell us, little human, what really happened during your species' final war?" The question hung in the air like a death sentence. These students weren't just bullies anymore. They were intelligence assets gathering information for their governments. Maya realized that her time at the academy hadn't been the sanctuary her father had hoped for. It had been an elaborate trap, designed to make her comfortable enough to reveal her true nature. "Last chance," Zixtal said, coiling his massive form into a striking position. "Tell us what you really are, or we'll beat the answers out of you." Maya looked around at the circle of hostile faces, these alien teenagers who thought they were dealing with a helpless victim. For 3 years she had tried to be normal, to bury the killer she had been trained to become, but some things once learned could never be forgotten. "You want to know what I am?" Maya asked softly, her posture shifting into something that would have been familiar to the battlefield commanders who had feared the Reaper's reputation. The change was subtle but unmistakable. Maya's stance became perfectly balanced, her hands positioned for maximum striking efficiency, her eyes scanning for the optimal sequence of attacks. The frightened student disappeared, replaced by something that had learned to kill before most people learned to drive. "I'm the reason your grandparents checked their locks at night," Maya said, her voice carrying an edge that made several of the attackers take an involuntary step backward. "I'm the nightmare your military strategists still wake up screaming about. I'm what happens when you try to exterminate a species that refuses to die quietly." Zixtal struck first, his massive coils whipping toward Maya with lethal force, but she was no longer where he had aimed. Moving with inhuman speed and precision, Maya flowed around his attack like water, her hands finding nerve clusters that dropped the Vraxian to the floor in convulsing agony. Cathara came next, all 4 arms swinging in a complex pattern that should have been impossible to dodge. Maya ducked under the first strike, redirected the second into the third, and used the Zenthari's own momentum to send her crashing into the wall hard enough to crack the crystalline structure of her exoskeleton. Plex tried to engulf Maya in his gelatinous mass, but she had fought Gelatari before. A precise strike to his core node sent him collapsing into an unconscious puddle, while the remaining attackers found themselves facing something their worst nightmares hadn't prepared them for. In less than 30 seconds, 6 of the Academy's strongest students lay unconscious or writhing in pain. Maya stood among them, breathing normally without a scratch on her uniform. The contrast between her apparent age and the devastation she had caused was almost surreal, but the victory felt hollow. She had blown her cover completely, revealed capabilities that would make her a target for every intelligence agency in the galaxy. The scared human girl act was over and there was no going back. Alarms began blaring throughout the facility. Security cameras had captured everything, and within minutes the Academy would be flooded with troops trying to capture or kill the last known Reaper. Maya had bought herself time, but not much. As she stepped over Zixtal's unconscious form and headed for the service elevator, Maya activated her father's emergency communicator. The message she sent was brief but loaded with meaning. Package compromised. Initiate Protocol 7. Somewhere in the outer rim her father would receive that signal and know that his daughter's cover had been blown. The human colonies would begin emergency relocation procedures, abandoning carefully constructed hiding places in preparation for the manhunt that was about to begin. Maya had tried to live as a normal student, but the galaxy wouldn't let her forget what she really was. The war wasn't over, and neither was her role in it. The Academy's security forces moved through the corridors like a swarm of armored insects, their weapons powered and ready. Maya could hear them coordinating over their communication channels as she made her way through the maintenance tunnels that ran beneath the main facility. Her enhanced hearing, a gift from Reaper augmentations, picked up fragments of their chatter. "Target is confirmed hostile," crackled a voice through the walls. "Extreme caution advised. We're dealing with a trained killer, not a student." Maya allowed herself a bitter smile as she crawled through the narrow access way. They were finally taking her seriously, but it was far too late. The scared little human girl had been a performance, and now they were about to learn why the Reapers had been the galaxy's most feared operatives. The tunnel system led to the Academy's power distribution center, a massive chamber filled with humming energy conduits and quantum processors. Maya emerged from the access hatch and immediately began setting charges at strategic points, using improvised explosives she had crafted from chemistry lab supplies. She wasn't trying to destroy the Academy, just create enough chaos to cover her escape. "Maya." She spun around to find Commander Thexel standing in the doorway, his sidearm drawn, but not yet aimed at her. The Thanarian's tactical instincts had led him to anticipate her route, but his expression suggested he was still trying to process what he had learned about his former student. I should have seen it sooner, he said, stepping into the chamber. The way you moved during combat training, the knowledge you displayed in tactical discussions, the way you analyzed historical battles. You weren't just studying them, you had lived through them. Maya straightened, abandoning any pretense of being the helpless student. How long have you known? I started suspecting after your fight with Zixtal, but the security footage from tonight confirmed everything. Thexel's weapon remained lowered, but his posture was that of a professional soldier facing a dangerous opponent. Project Reaper was classified above my clearance level, but I've heard the stories. Human children trained from birth to be perfect killers. Most of us thought it was propaganda. It wasn't, Maya said simply. We were real. We are real. How many of you survived the purge? The question hit harder than a physical blow. Maya thought of her fellow Reapers, Sarah, who had held a mountain pass against an entire army until her ammunition ran out. Marcus, who had sacrificed himself to evacuate a civilian transport. Helena, who had disappeared into enemy territory and never been seen again. I don't know, Maya admitted. Communications were cut during the final evacuation. I've been hoping to find others, but the galaxy is a big place to hide in. Thexel holstered his weapon, and Maya realized with surprise that she wasn't reading any hostile intent from him. The commander's expression had shifted to something resembling respect, tinged with the wariness that professional soldiers showed when recognizing a peer. The official reports say that humanity was wiped out for being too violent, too dangerous to coexist with civilized species, he said. But you've been here for months, and until tonight you never hurt anyone. That doesn't match the propaganda. Maya felt something inside her chest loosen slightly. For 3 years she had lived with the weight of being branded a monster by association with her species. To hear someone acknowledge that the official narrative might be wrong was almost overwhelming. The war started because we refused to surrender our independence, Maya said. The Galactic Coalition wanted to place human worlds under direct alien administration. When we said no, they decided to make an example of us. And the Reapers? We were created because conventional military tactics weren't working. The Coalition had superior numbers and technology, so humanity needed something they couldn't predict or counter. Maya gestured to herself. Children who could think outside normal parameters, who could adapt faster than military computers could compensate for. Thexel was quiet for a long moment, processing the implications of what she had told him. How old were you during the Battle of Centauri Prime? 14. The memories of that engagement still gave Maya nightmares. Centauri Prime had been a civilian colony with minimal defenses, but the Coalition had targeted it specifically because of its symbolic importance to human culture. I held the evacuation routes open for 6 hours while the transports launched. Alone? My team was killed in the opening bombardment. I had to improvise. Maya's voice was matter-of-fact, but Thexel could see the pain behind her words. 2 million civilians made it off-world. That was worth whatever it cost. The commander's respect was now mixed with something approaching awe. The Battle of Centauri Prime was studied in military academies across the galaxy as an example of impossible tactical achievement. The fact that it had been accomplished by a 14-year-old child was almost beyond comprehension. The intelligence services are converging on this location, Thexel said. You have maybe 10 minutes before they lock down the entire facility. But I'm not here to stop you. Maya stared at him in surprise. You're letting me go? I've spent my career studying warfare and military history. The official version of the human wars never made sense from a tactical perspective. Too many impossible victories, too many strategic decisions that worked despite violating basic military doctrine. Thexel met her eyes directly. But if those decisions were made by minds that operated outside normal parameters, then everything clicks into place. He reached into his uniform and pulled out a small data chip. This contains the real classified files on Project Reaper and the final battles of the war. Information that was buried so deep that most people forgot it existed. You have a right to know what really happened to your people. Maya took the chip with trembling hands. For 3 years, she had lived with fragments of memory and partial information. The idea of finally learning the complete truth was both terrifying and necessary. Why are you helping me? She asked. Because the galaxy needs to know the truth about what happened during the purge. The Coalition powers that be want everyone to believe that humanity was exterminated for being monsters, but the real story is much more complicated. Thexel turned toward the door, then paused. There's something else you should know. You're not the only Reaper who survived. The intelligence networks have been tracking anomalous incidents across the Outer Rim for years. Someone with your training has been leaving breadcrumbs. Maya's heart leaped. The possibility that she wasn't alone in the universe was something she had barely dared to hope for. But it also meant that other Reapers were still active, still fighting whatever battles needed to be fought. Find them, Thexel said. Find your people. The galaxy owes humanity a debt that can never be repaid, but maybe it's not too late to set the record straight. As alarms blared throughout the academy and security forces closed in on their location, Maya activated the improvised charges she had placed. The power distribution center erupted in controlled explosions that plunged half the facility into darkness, giving her the cover she needed to escape into the night. But as she made her way toward the shuttle bay, Maya carried with her something more valuable than any weapon or tactical advantage. For the first time in 3 years, she had hoped that the truth about humanity might finally see the light of day. The stolen transport ship drifted silently through the asteroid field of the carry-on system, its engines powered down to avoid detection. Maya sat in the pilot's chair, staring at the data chip Commander Thexel had given her. For 3 days, she had been afraid to activate it, terrified of what she might learn about the final fate of her people, but hiding from the truth had never been an option for a Reaper. The files that loaded onto her screen painted a picture of the war that was both more heroic and more tragic than anything Maya had imagined. She read through combat reports that detailed impossible victories achieved by her fellow Reapers, strategic analyses that marveled at humanity's ability to adapt and survive against overwhelming odds, and classified communications that revealed the Coalition's growing desperation as the war dragged on. But it was the final document that broke her heart. The evacuation. Protocol had been humanity's last desperate gambit. As Coalition forces closed in on the remaining human worlds, a massive operation had been launched to scatter the survivors across the galaxy. Children were sent to distant colonies, families were broken apart and hidden on remote stations, and the Reapers were dispersed to serve as guardians for the hidden enclaves. Maya found her own name in the files, listed among 37 Reapers who had been assigned to protection duties. According to the records, 23 of them had checked in during the first year after the evacuation. By the second year, that number had dropped to 11. The most recent confirmed contact was over 18 months ago, but buried in the intelligence appendix, Maya found something that made her heart race with excitement. Anomalous incidents reported across 7 different sectors, all bearing the hallmarks of Reaper involvement. A pirate fleet that had mysteriously disbanded after their leader was found dead with injuries, consistent with advanced combat techniques. A slave trading operation that had been systematically dismantled by an unknown operative. A Coalition research facility that had suffered a security breach resulting in the destruction of biological weapons targeting human DNA. Someone was out there, continuing the fight. Maya cross-referenced the locations with the hidden colony databases her father had given her, looking for patterns. 3 of the incidents had occurred near systems where human survivors were supposedly hiding. If another Reaper was protecting those enclaves, it meant the old network was still functioning, even if communications had been severed. She plotted a course for the nearest anomaly site, a mining station in the Vega system where a corporate security team had reportedly been found unconscious, with no memory of what had happened to them. The station's data cores had been selectively wiped, removing only files related to genetic research and population surveys, exactly the kind of information that could be used to track hidden human settlements. The journey to Vega took 6 days, during which Maya found herself questioning everything she thought she knew about her situation. For 3 years, she had believed she might be one of the last humans alive. The discovery that others were not only surviving but actively protecting their people changed everything. Vega Station was a grimy industrial platform that processed rare minerals from the system's asteroid belt. The kind of place where questions weren't asked as long as credits kept flowing. Maya docked her ship and made her way into the station's commercial sector, using false identification documents that identified her as a freelance data recovery specialist. The station's security office was her first stop. Maya had learned long ago that information was often more valuable than weapons, and security personnel tended to see everything that happened on their stations. A few carefully placed bribes bought her access to the incident reports from 3 weeks ago. The files described a textbook Reaper operation. Corporate security had been neutralized with non-lethal techniques that left them unconscious but uninjured. The data theft had been surgical, targeting only specific files while leaving everything else untouched. Most telling of all, the security cameras had recorded nothing more than brief electrical disturbances, the signature of high-end stealth technology that only Reapers had access to. "You're not the first person to ask about that incident," the security chief mentioned as Maya reviewed the files. He was a grizzled Voltron whose cybernetic implants had seen better days. Had another data specialist asking the same questions about a week ago. "Cute little thing, reminded me of my daughter." Maya's pulse quickened. "Another human?" "Yeah, how'd you guess? Don't see many of your people out this far in the rim." She was real interested in the same files you're looking at. The security chief leaned back in his chair, studying Maya with increased interest. "You two working the same case?" "Something like that," Maya said, trying to keep the excitement out of her voice. "Did she leave any contact information?" "No, but she did ask about transportation to the Helix Nebula, said she had business in that sector." The Voltron's expression grew more serious. "Word of advice, that's Coalition territory. Dangerous place for humans these days." Maya thanked him and left the security office, her mind racing with possibilities. The Helix Nebula was home to one of the largest human refugee camps, hidden in the heart of a stellar nursery, where sensor interference made detection nearly impossible. If another Reaper was heading there, it could mean the camp was either under threat or in need of assistance. She made her way back to her ship, planning the fastest route to the nebula. But as she passed through the station's main concourse, something made her stop. In the crowd of aliens conducting business and trading goods, she caught a glimpse of someone who didn't belong. A young woman, apparently human, standing near an equipment vendor. She was small and unremarkable, the kind of person who could disappear into any crowd. But Maya's trained eye caught the subtle signs that marked her as something more dangerous than she appeared. The way she positioned herself with clear sightlines to all exits, the casual stance that could shift into combat readiness in an instant, the eyes that constantly tracked potential threats while maintaining the appearance of casual browsing. Maya felt her breath catch. She was looking at another Reaper. For a moment, their eyes met across the crowded concourse. The other woman's expression shifted through surprise, recognition, and wariness in the space of a heartbeat. Maya raised her hand slightly, fingers configured in a recognition signal that had been drilled into every Reaper during training. The response came immediately, the same signal, followed by a more complex sequence that identified the other woman as Reaper designation 77 Alpha. Sarah Chen, one of Maya's former teammates who had been presumed dead when her transport went missing during the evacuation. Sarah made a subtle gesture toward a quieter section of the station, then melted back into the crowd with practiced ease. Maya followed, her heart pounding with the realization that she was no longer alone in the universe. The reunion took place in a small cargo bay that Sarah had rented under an assumed identity. When the door sealed behind them, both women stood frozen for a moment, hardly daring to believe that they had found each other after 3 years of isolation. "Maya," Sarah said finally, her voice thick with emotion, "I thought you were dead." "We all did. I've been hiding," Maya replied, trying to be normal. "It didn't work out very well." Sarah laughed, but there was no humor in the sound. "Normal, yeah, I tried that too. Lasted about 6 months before I realized there are still people out there who need protecting." She gestured to a wall display showing star charts marked with dozens of red indicators. Coalition forces have been conducting systematic sweeps of the outer rim. They're not just looking for hidden colonies anymore. They're trying to finish what they started. Maya stared at the display, understanding immediately what it represented. Each red marker was a location where human survivors had been discovered and eliminated. The genocide that everyone believed had ended 3 years ago was still continuing in secret. "How many colonies have we lost?" Maya asked. 14 confirmed, maybe more. "The bastards have gotten smarter about covering their tracks." Sarah's expression hardened with familiar determination. "But they haven't found all of us yet. And as long as there are Reapers still breathing, they're going to have a fight on their hands." Looking at her old teammate, Maya felt something she hadn't experienced in 3 years, a sense of purpose that went beyond mere survival. The war wasn't over, and humanity still needed its guardians. The scared little girl who had tried to hide among her enemies was gone forever, replaced by what she had always been meant to be. A Reaper, ready to remind the galaxy why they had been so feared. 6 months after her escape from the Academy, Maya stood on the observation deck of Haven Station, watching as the latest transport ship brought refugees from another rescued colony. The hidden facility, carved into an asteroid in the Corona Nebula, had become the heart of a growing resistance network that stretched across 3 sectors of the galaxy. What had started as a desperate search for surviving Reapers had evolved into something neither Maya nor Sarah had expected, a full-scale revival of humanity's guardian network. They had found 7 other Reapers scattered across the rim, each one protecting small groups of survivors, while conducting lonely wars against coalition forces that continued their secret genocide. The Meridian colony evacuation was successful, Sarah reported, joining Maya at the viewport. Marcus managed to get all 400 survivors out before the coalition sweep arrived. They'll be processed through the Titan relay and dispersed to secure locations within the week. Maya nodded, watching children play in the station's common areas. 3 years ago, these same children had been hiding in fear, knowing that discovery meant death. Now they laughed and learned in safety, protected by guardians who had refused to let their people fade quietly into extinction. Any word from Elena's sector? Maya asked. Intelligence blackout for the past 2 weeks. Could be operational security, or she might have run into trouble. Sarah's expression was grim. The coalition has been adapting their tactics. They're starting to connect the dots between the anomalous incidents and Reaper activity. Maya had expected this development. For months, they had been conducting operations across multiple systems, rescuing hidden colonies and disrupting coalition forces. It was inevitable that someone would recognize the patterns and realize that humanity's legendary warriors had survived the purge. Let them come, Maya said quietly. We're not the same frightened children they scattered 3 years ago. The transformation had been remarkable to witness. Each rescued Reaper had brought not only their unique skills but also their protected communities of survivors. Haven Station now housed over 2,000 humans, making it the largest concentration of their people since the fall of Terra Prime. More importantly, they had established a communication network that connected hidden enclaves across dozens of systems. But Maya knew that their success had made them a target. Coalition intelligence agencies were already investigating the surge in anomalous activities, and it was only a matter of time before they traced the operations back to their source. The question was whether humanity would be ready for the confrontation that was coming. Maya, called a voice from behind them. They turned to see Commander Thexel approaching, his Thanarian features showing the strain of recent events. He had arrived at Haven Station 2 months ago, bringing with him a group of alien military officers who had grown disgusted with their government's continued persecution of human survivors. Commander, Maya acknowledged. What's the status of the coalition fleet movements? Not good, Thexel replied, activating a holographic display that showed the local star chart. 3 battle groups have been repositioned to blockade the main hyperspace routes into this sector. They're not just conducting sweeps anymore, they're planning something big. Sarah studied the tactical display with professional interest. Estimated time until they locate Haven Station? 2 weeks, maybe less. The Corona Nebula provides excellent sensor cover, but they've brought gravimetric scanners that can detect large artificial structures. Thexel's expression was apologetic but determined. It's time to consider evacuation protocols. Maya felt a familiar weight settle on her shoulders. For 6 months, Haven Station had been more than just a military base. It had been proof that humanity could rebuild, that their people had a future beyond mere survival. The thought of abandoning it felt like another defeat in a war that had already cost them everything. But as she looked at the children playing in the common areas, Maya realized that the station had never been the real victory. The victory was the network they had built, the connections they had forged, the hope they had restored to scattered communities across the galaxy. Haven Station was just a symbol, and symbols could be rebuilt. No, Maya said, surprising both Sarah and Thexel. We're not evacuating. Maya, be reasonable, Sarah protested. 3 battle groups against a single station? Those aren't odds we can fight. You're right. We can't fight 3 battle groups. Maya turned from the viewport, her expression carrying the same determination that had once allowed a 14-year-old girl to hold an entire planet's evacuation routes against impossible odds. But we're not going to fight them. We're going to remind the galaxy why they were so afraid of us in the first place. Over the next week, Haven Station transformed from a refugee center into something the galaxy hadn't seen since the height of the human wars. A fully operational Reaper command facility. The 7 surviving Reapers worked with military precision to prepare for the coming confrontation, while their alien allies coordinated intelligence gathering and resource allocation. Maya stood in the command center, surrounded by holographic displays showing the positions of coalition forces throughout the sector. Each ship, each facility, each command structure had been mapped and analyzed. The enemy thought they were hunting scattered survivors, but they were about to discover that they had walked into a trap designed by minds that had been trained to think several steps ahead of conventional military doctrine. "All units report ready," Sarah announced from her position at the tactical console. "Reaper teams are in position at primary and secondary targets. Allied forces are standing by for coordination support." Maya activated the station-wide communication system, her voice carrying to every human survivor within range. 3 years ago, they tried to erase us from the galaxy. They believed that if they killed enough of our people, broke enough of our worlds, we would simply disappear into history. They were wrong. On screens throughout the station, humans who had spent years hiding in fear looked up with expressions of hope and determination. These were the survivors of a genocide, the remnants of a civilization that had refused to surrender even when faced with extinction. Today, we remind the galaxy that humanity doesn't die quietly. We remind them that every time they thought they had won, we adapted, we survived, and we came back stronger. Maya's voice carried the weight of every battle fought, every sacrifice made, every promise kept during the darkest years of their people's history. Today, we show them what happens when you try to exterminate a species that has learned to thrive in the dark between the stars. Today, we show them why they should have feared the name Reaper. As coalition battle groups moved into attack positions around the Corona Nebula, they had no way of knowing that they were facing the concentrated fury of humanity's greatest warriors. The scared little girl who had once endured her classmates' taunts was gone forever, replaced by the guardian she had always been meant to become. The galaxy was about to remember why humans had once been considered the most dangerous species in known space. And this time, there would be survivors to tell the story of what happened when you cornered the last remnants of a people who had nothing left to lose and everything to fight for. In the depths of space, ancient battle stations that had been hidden since the Purge began powering up their weapons systems. Sleeper ships that had drifted dark and silent for 3 years activated their navigation systems and began plotting intercept courses. And across dozens of systems, human survivors who had spent years in hiding stepped out of the shadows with weapons in their hands and fire in their eyes. The Second Human War was about to begin, and this time humanity would not be the victims.